Books to Big Screen Episode 1 is happening right now. Let's get started. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for watching, thank you for being here. If this is your first time here, make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Today we are bringing you the very first episode of Books to Big Screen. If you saw kind of our intro, our precursor that came out last week, which was about adaptations just kind of in general, a little brief discussion about that. Today we are diving into our very first comparison, and we will be talking about Cabin at the End of the World versus the M. Night Shyamalan movie, Knock at the Cabin. Comparing, contrasting, answering the question that everybody wants to know, is the book always better? Well, without further ado, let's just dive right in. So this movie is directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Very prolific name. If you don't know the name, you've at least seen some of his movies. The Village, Sixth Sense, Signs. And what he's most known for doing, like, twists, which makes Cabin at the End of the World kind of a good choice for him, honestly, because there's an ambiguous nature to the book. And I should say, these whole episodes are going to be full of spoilers. There's literally no way to talk about these things without spoilers. If you want my spoiler-free opinions, not of the movie, but of the book, you can check out the video that came out earlier this week, why you should read Cabin at the End of the World. And I kind of go over briefly, like, why I think you should read the book, and then this is going to be just full spoiler. I'm not holding anything back. So if you haven't seen the movie or read the book, what are you doing here? But maybe that's something you should do before watching the rest of this video. As I was saying, I think the ambiguous nature of the book kind of lends itself a little bit to M. Night Shyamalan, kind of maybe puts him a little bit right in his wheelhouse, like where he prefers to operate. When he was attached to this, I was interested. You know, I thought, okay, this could be a good thing for him. I mean, I really only read the book because I know that the movie was coming out, and I ended up, like, loving the book. So, knowing the premise and knowing that M. Night Shyamalan was attached, I was excited. And so the basic premise is a young couple, two men and their adopted daughter, are vacationing at a lake house, and they are visited by a group of four strangers who give them somewhat of an interesting proposition that was going to change their family, but also, like, the world forever. Potentially, right? And so the choice that they are forced to make is these intruders tell them that they have all received, like, a shared vision. They are acting under the will of God. Like, the apocalypse is coming, and if this family does not willingly sacrifice one of their members, right? Like, one of the members that come to the house, they can't kill them, and they can't force them to sacrifice anyone. It has to be a willing choice. And if they do that, they can save the world from apocalypse. And obviously, this strikes the big question of, are they telling the truth? Are they homophobe people? Are they religious zealots who are just trying to, like, rid the world of gay people? These are all the questions that kind of come up. And it forces them to kind of tackle, like, do we believe that these people are telling the truth, or do we not? Are we going to side with our own family over, like, giving into fear? And I think, at least I think that's a lot of what the book is trying to tackle. And I think the movie makes some choices that kind of, I don't want to say discredit the book, but it kind of, there's some choices made in the movie that don't hit the right way. They don't hit as impactful as things that happened in the book. And I think it was definitely a deliberate choice by M. Night Shyamalan, and I think it was the wrong one. Let's start. The opening, I would say, like, the first half of this movie is a very faithful adaptation to the book. I think the opening scene with Wen catching grasshoppers with Dave Bautista is a great scene. It's pulled directly from the pages of the opening of the book. It's great. And I think that Dave Bautista, the casting as Leonard, is phenomenal. He's a bit older than Leonard is described in the book. I think in the book he's only like 25 or 26. But Dave Bautista is obviously, like, in his 40s. I think the other characters are very well cast and very well acted. There is a slight problem. I think near some of their emotional scenes where they like have a tendency to overact quite a bit. Abby Quinn, who plays Adrian, I think she gives us this emotional monologue, and I think she's kind of an overactor. But again, that's kind of how it goes with M. Night Shyamalan. So I don't know if that is like was a her thing or if that was like a directorial choice. But yeah, I don't think it really works that well, because in the book it's like we get the same kind of pleading from them, but it's I don't know, it just reads a little bit differently in the book than it's portrayed in the movie. So the intruders, they make their way into the home, and they tie them up, and they kind of tell them like what their decision has to be, right? Like, hey, you have to willingly sacrifice a member of your family, or the apocalypse will come. And they're like, the first time they're like, no, we're not doing that. And so what happens when they refuse is one of the 4 members of this group, they like sacrifice themselves to. They explain it as like to give them more time to decide. I don't know if that's ever. I believe that's explicitly stated in the book, but I don't specifically remember the passage. But basically, Redmond, who's played by Rupert Grint, he is he is sacrificed by the group, and this is kind of like where my first problem came with the movie. It in regards as an adaptation, I think it's a fine movie, but like as an adaptation, this is where I first started to be like, okay. So Redmond's death is off screen, right? Like they put the hood on the same, and he like pleads for his life and like kind of drops the tough guy persona like when he's about to die, which he does not do in the book. And I think it really it takes away from what that character is supposed to be in the book for him to like be pleading for his life in the movie. But regardless, like, the death is off screen, and I think that is a problem. The movie is rated R. You can really go for it. It's a rated R horror movie that came out in February. Like, the movie probably was not made for very much. It didn't have to make a ton of money back to be profitable. Like, it just had to make, like, probably like $40 million, and it would have been profitable. So, like, it's these kinds of movies where you can take these kinds of risks. And in the book, the deaths of these 4 individuals are so like brutal, and they like really like create. It's part of the creation of the atmosphere that exists in this cabin, right? Where like everything is like very dreary and bleak and hopeless, and like the end of the world is coming, like everything is terrible, and these deaths and the brutality of them in specifically adds to that. And I think by not showing us that, by doing it off screen, you lose something. You lose the brutality. You lose, like, I think a lot of what the movie is, or a lot of what the source material is attempting to get at, which is, like, the evils at which supposedly good people can commit. And I think that's a big, big part of the book, is how, like, we have this kind of, like, proclivity towards violence, and how even seemingly good people also have this proclivity and are capable of doing just horrendous things to people. And so, like, by not showing us that, we lose that connection. We don't get that same idea being conveyed to us that, okay, so these 4 people, Leonard is very gentle and soft-spoken, and he iterates tons and tons of times that he doesn't want to hurt them. He's not going to hurt them. They just simply have a choice to make. And he seems, for all intents and purposes, regardless of what he's there to do and to put that family through, it doesn't seem like outside of that he's a mean, malicious person. And so that has to come from somewhere. Like, the terrible acts that he does in the 4 walls of that cabin, like, have to come from somewhere. And by not showing us these horrific acts, like, we kind of don't draw that conclusion. We lose that from the story. And I think it is such an important part of the book, such an important part of the atmosphere to the story, that is just lost by having off-screen deaths. And Redmond's not the only one. Almost all deaths are off-screen in the movie. After Redmond's death, they like turn on the TV, and Leonard like shows them like the tsunami and the waves coming and all of that, and like how like this is like, see, like, this is what happens. Like, we told you the apocalypse was coming. Here's our shred of proof. And this is kind of where I think the movie does do a pretty good job of handling the arguments of like, yes, the apocalypse is coming, or no, it's not. This could all have been like planned. You know, they point out that, well, this had to have happened before you've come here, because that's how they got all the news coverage and all that. And so obviously, the tsunami happened, you knew about it, you're using this as like part of your plan, whatever. And I think these components are effective. I liked seeing like the news coverage on the TV. Like, I think it's what I've talked about before. I think seeing acts of violence are kind of like more impactful than reading them. And I think seeing like the big wave come and like take out all these people was like a bit more impactful than reading it. So this is an area where I think the movie, just by the inherent nature of movies, like, is able to be a little bit more effective. And obviously, if you've watched the movie or if you've read the book, like, I don't need to go through the entire plot, right? Because like for the most part, like the plotting like stays the same. It's a very simple thing. It's a very through line plot, like beginning to end. It has a very simple like thriller structure, very reminiscent of like 90s thrillers, which is like kind of what M. Night was trying to like capture. And I think he does a very good job. Basically, after Redmond's death, after they see that, this is kind of where the movie starts to divulge a little bit from the book. And there is a huge thing that happens in the book that does not happen in the movie. And I think that is a mistake. But before we get to that, there's a few things that I want to tackle first. First of all, the book has shifting narrators, or shifting perspectives. It is always third person, but sometimes it's first person plural, which was interesting. But it shifts from Andrew to Eric to Wen, and then near the end we get Sabrina, we get Leonard, we get other perspectives on this, and so that is something that the movie just loses. And I think a big part of it that the movie loses is Wen. And so there's a decision that is made regarding like to not do something that happens in the book that I think in this movie is a good decision, because I don't think it would be as impactful, but I think as a whole it's the wrong decision. So that's very vague. So let's talk about it a little bit. What this movie does, and what the book is allowed to do by shifting perspectives, is it establishes the room. We know where everybody is. We know what everyone is thinking. When a big event happens, we usually are seeing that big event from at least two different perspectives, right? So something will happen. Let's say Andrew is narrating, and like something happens, and then we will switch to Eric, and it is at like the tail end of the event that is happening, so we get Eric's perspective on it as well. And the book also includes, every so often, Wen's perspective. And so we are constantly aware of Wen, what she's thinking, what she's doing. And that is something that the movie does not do. And I think it is a fault of the movie that it kind of forgets that Wen is there. And I think it's just because, like, nobody wants to kill a kid. And so, like, we know that killing Wen was kind of off the table. And so it's like, well, what do you do with her then? Like, she creates the distraction, sure. But other than that, she doesn't have anything else to do. And that is a clear advantage for the book, in which it can have these different perspectives. It can have, it can take a moment to tell us about, Wen going to school, or Wen finding the gun safe, or things like this, that the movie just can't do. And the movie tries to do it. There are times where we, like, cut to a scene of, like, our meeting or Eric's parents, or, by the time they went to China to adopt Wen. Like, the movie tries to interject these kinds of scenes, and I just don't think those scenes work. Because in the book, you can kind of, like, make comments about those events that have taken place to give us a better understanding of these characters, of this world that we're living in. And it doesn't, like, you're only doing it in a couple of sentences, so it's not really breaking the tension, it's not really breaking the pacing. In the movie, like, you're taking deliberate cuts to a whole new scene to tell us these events that have taken place that really, like, aren't that impactful at the end of the day. Like, you could cut them, and I think the movie still works the same way. But what you do when you cut to it in a movie is we have now lost the tension that you've built. We've now lost the atmosphere that you've created, and all of that has to be done again. And so I think that is an inherent advantage that the book has over the movie. All right, so the big difference, like let's get to it, because then from here, like we're way past the halfway point, and this is where things really start to divulge. And I think this is really where the movie starts to lose me. In the book, Andrew escapes. He gets the gun. Adrian attacks him, and he shoots and kills her. Right, like she comes at him with a knife. He shoots and kills her. After that, there's a scuffle between Andrew and Leonard, which does happen in the movie. Leonard kind of like disappears. They fight in the bathroom. They scuffle. They try to fight over the gun. And this, I honestly thought they were going to do it. I really thought so. When they started wrestling for the gun, I really thought it was going to happen. And so, in the book, while they are wrestling for the gun goes off, shoots and kills Wen. Wen dies. They did not do this in the movie, which, again, this is what, when I said that, like, I think tonally and, like, thematically, the two works need to kind of be working together, like, the movie and the book need to be working together to kind of keep that message or, like, keep that tone intact. This is where the movie starts to break away from that. And I think at this point is where they go in an entirely different direction, and they, like, lose everything that the last third of the book is doing, which is very impactful. And they don't kill Wen in the movie, which I think it's a tough sell, right? Like, I can understand the decision to not do it, but I think you lose so much by not doing it. I understand people will come out not liking that you've done that, but you already have their money. Like, they already paid for the ticket. You already got it. Like, take that chance, right? What I hate the most is the cop-out answers that we've got from M. Night Shyamalan when doing press for this movie. When asked about the difference between the ending of the book and the ending of the movie, he basically is like, mainstream audiences, like, aren't prepared for that. They can't handle that, right? That's essentially the answer that he gave. It's too dark, it's too bleak, mainstream audiences would never tolerate that. And I hate that answer. I hate it. Because who are you to tell us what we can and cannot handle? Make the movie, put it out there, let audiences tell you if that's something that they can handle. You do not, I don't feel like they should get to make that choice for us. Like, do I want to see a kid die on screen? No, but like, it's impactful for a reason. Like, it has a purpose within the story, and you've lost that in the movie. And I think because of that, your movie doesn't land the way that it should, because you haven't given us anything of consequence from these events, right? Like, nothing that consequential happens. It's just a pretty terrible weekend. But I'm also glad they don't go that route, because since Wen has nothing to do in this movie, her death would not land the same way that it does in the book, because in the book she's a character. She's doing things all the time. She's reminding us that she exists quite constantly. And so that's why it is impactful when it happens in the book, but it would not have been impactful in the movie, but you could have orchestrated the movie in a different way to make it impactful. And so Wen does not die. Leonard ends up killing himself to give them a few more moments to decide, right? And it's in these moments where they kind of have a conversation, and first of all, they put the whole Four Horsemen thing together for you, which I think isn't it would have been a nice Easter egg to not have blatantly explained to people. But no, we have to explain this because Eric has a vision of Wen in the future, and how if they don't make this sacrifice now, Wen will never get that future. And so he makes a sacrifice. Andrew has to kill Eric, and they leave, and all of the bad things that were happening just stop. They stop at a diner. They see on TV, our problems are solved. Everything is better. Everything's great now. And what I hate the most about this is it picks a side. And I would argue that the book picks a side as well, but it doesn't tell you what side. And there's enough evidence in the book, there's enough evidence for you to argue either side. I personally think that it lands on one side versus the other, but the book doesn't tell you that. It allows you to make your own decision. That is the beauty of ambiguity. You don't treat the audience like idiots, and they can decide for themselves, because ultimately what is important is the choice, not the impact of that choice, right? Choosing to not do something, choosing to not give into fear, choosing to not let these people bully you into something, and choosing to just, well, if this is the end of the world, we will do what people have always done, and we will carry on. We will do what has to be done as a family. Like, the choice is what is important, not like what the choice says, not the answer that you get from the choice. Am I conveying that correctly? That is the point of the book. That is the point of the last chapter of the book. The point is the choice. Making the choice is what's important, not the conclusion of the choice. That's why the book ends ambiguously, because they make a choice, and it is up for you, the reader, to decide. Do you think that the apocalypse is coming, or do you think it was all fake? And ultimately, what you read out of that says something about you. Like, that is the point. And so I hate that this movie solves the mystery for us and, like, resides essentially saying, like, that God is real, and, like, that, like, all the religious stuff was true, and, like, we all need to, like, follow God. It ends on a very, like, deeply religious sentiment, which I could see being just as off-putting for people as, like, the alternative. Again, there's a section at the end of the book, basically, like, they are making the argument that our daughter is killed, right? So in the book, Wen is killed, they are wondering whether or not that is a sufficient sacrifice to ward off the apocalypse, and it is decided that it isn't. And so even members of the group, Leonard and Sabrina, Eric and Andrew, they all kind of come to the same conclusion that if we live under a God where that is not sufficient sacrifice, maybe the world is not worth saving. If the death of a child is not good enough for you, why should we give you anything else? And that is such, like, an important and emotional decision to come to, where at the end they decide, even if this is all going to go to shit, even if the apocalypse is coming, we are better off just going forward, facing it head on, going on the way we were meant to, rather than giving into that, rather than saying, like, if our daughter dying wasn't enough, is this really even a world we want to live in? That is far more impactful than being told, like, hey, you killed your husband, so thanks. The rest of the world can go on now. And, like, there's a lot of other things that happen within the movie that, like, solve things from the book that don't get solved. For example, the Redmond-O'Bannon dilemma, like, they solve that for you. They tell you that Redmond was O'Bannon, which points towards evidence that this is a hate crime. I think that is a very weird decision to make, like, to solve that for you and to tell you, like, oh yeah, this actually was the guy who attacked him in a bar. Like, this actually was the guy who committed a hate crime against these, like, this gay couple. What does that do for us, knowing that answer? Like, it serves as evidence to the contrary in the book of, like, no, you guys targeted us. And so it plants that seed of doubt in the reader. They're like, oh, okay, I could see why something else might be going on here. But, like, again, this movie refuses for there to be any kind of ambiguity, refuses to let the audience decide for themselves, and just gives you, like, the most plain, generic, boring answer that God will take care of everything. Not that I'm against, like, religion or, like, religious people or, like, religious sentiment in movies, but I think, like, this is what makes it a bad adaptation, is that rather than leaving it ambiguous for people, it solves every little mystery. There's no nuance at all. And so I think that is the ultimate problem with this adaptation. And so if you were asking me, is the book always better? In this scenario, the book is way better. I think there's way more to get out of it, way more to, like, dive into and to see, and I would highly encourage, if you have not read the book, to please go ahead and read the book. But that is all I have for you today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. If you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel. Let us know down in the comments below if you think this is a good adaptation, why or why not. We can continue the conversation there. And until next time, thank you for watching. Keep reading good books.